It's been so long in Adrienette Fanfiction, Part 15. Marinette flung herself on her bed and groaned softly. "And you can't know?" she asked her Kwame for the 5th time. Tiki sighed. "Not right now. All we have is one Akuma to go off of. For all we know, it could have been a stronger feeling," Tiki explained again. "So, I just have to keep it in the back of my mind that Akumas, and maybe Hawkmoth themselves, is getting more powerful, and we'll just have to deal with it?" Marinette complained. She had kept a secret from Shop before. Well, she'd kept many secrets, but in the terms of things that actually collided with him, just one. And that was hard to do. That was Master Fu. And speaking of which, eventually Master Fu told him what was up, but he was super suspicious leading up to that point. Tiki perched on her shoulder in a way to comfort her. No words could help. They would just end up being lies. "Come on, Mari, you need to sleep," Tiki urged. Marinette was pacing her room for another hour after Chat Noir left, despite her trying to sleep. "I know, but I just can't, and I might as well do something productive other than lay it down and be on my phone," she defended. Tiki tugged on Marinette's finger with enough strength to pull her down towards the bed. "Just try, and the lights are not going to help." Marinette wrapped herself tightly in the blankets. She closed her eyes, trying her hardest to fall into a deep slumber, but it never came. Even an hour later, Marinette was wide awake in her dark and quiet room. She reached over to her phone and checked the time. 12:49. Wonderful. She was going to be a living corpse tomorrow. Oh well, nothing like a little concealer couldn't fix. Or maybe a lot of concealer. Marinette looked at herself in the mirror hours later. The actual amount of sleep she had gotten was still unknown, but no more than, say, 4 hours to be generous. "Tiki, if I crash today, will everyone just let me die?" she asked. Tiki shook her head, and Marinette groaned and pulled her hair up into pigtails. She had upgraded her hairstyle. It was still rarely completely down. Nowadays, it was in a small pigtails in the front with the rest of her hair down, though she did like to braid it up into a bun on special days when she had the time. Marinette yawned. "I wish that tomorrow was Saturday," she grumbled, picking up her phone and checking the time. "About 10 minutes less time to eat breakfast. Dang it." Tiki gave her a reassuring pat on the shoulder and told her that she'd make it through the day. Marinette smiled weakly and headed down to eat something. "Marinette, did you even sleep?" Alia said when she asked her when she got to school. Marinette shrugged. Alia looked at her up and down in concern. "You should go and find Celeste. Her mom should let you take a nap in her classroom," Alia said, pointing to the girl with blue and green hair. "Okay, thanks, Alia," Marinette smiled. Alia waved her off with a "no problem, girl," and went off to probably find Nino. Her nap only lasted, say, 25 minutes, but it was more than enough to get her through the rest of the school day, and especially through her next class. Chloe was her desk partner, and there was literally nothing else that either of them could do about it. Their teacher was from, Australia and was very stubborn about her seating arrangement. She got into her AP bio class and set her bag down onto the table and rested her head in her arms. She was still tired as heck, but not passing out level of tired like before. "This is ridiculous! Utterly ridiculous!" she heard a shrill voice shriek. "Oh my god, I'm going to lose my mind," Marinette thought. Normally she could ignore the irritating blonde, but her lack of sleep had impeded on her patience levels. Chloe, you're utterly ridiculous, Marinette snapped. She pulled her head back up and leaned back, crossing her arms. I swear to God, this girl is psycho, Marinette whispered under her breath. But apparently, Chloe heard. Her face got red and stomped up to her desk to try and glare Marinette down. Oh, don't think you can talk like that, Marinette, Chloe shouted. Marinette sighed, way too done with this conversation, but also not thinking straight. Ah, bless a terrible night's sleep. It makes you snappier, more irritated, and less controlled. Oh, and who says? Marinette challenged. She could see Alia practically dancing out of the corner of her eyes and almost broke out laughing. But instead, she kept an even and cold stare, but a smirk escaped her control. I say, Chloe screeched, slapping her hands down on the desk so hard it shook violently. Marinette sighed again. You're saying that like I care, she said aspiratedly. Chloe gasped dramatically. You, ugh, Chloe sputtered. Marinette felt her lips curl up into a more sly smirk. What? Cat got your tongue? The words escaped her mouth faster than lightning. Well, there goes a calm day in class. This is why we sleep, so we don't lose our temper. Marinette winced slightly. Darn you, stupid cat. Did it have to be a cat pun, of all things? In her peripheral vision, Marinette could see Adrienne chuckling, and her smirk widened. Dang it. Chloe whipped her head around and demanded at the teacher to move her spots and fail her. Marinette scowled. Seriously? Just because I can stand my ground, you want me to fail? How childish and petty is that? It's not like the bio teacher will listen to you or whatever. Marinette rolled her eyes and pulled out a sketchbook. I refuse to sit by a bakery wench. Marinette froze. What had Chloe just called her? No. No, she did not. The anger boiled in her, and she could feel her nails digging into the palm of her hands involuntarily. What did you just call me? She said icily and calmly. She could even feel Tiki shaking with rage in her purse. You heard what I said, Chloe replied, just as unhinged as she was. That's it. No more control. Slam. Marinette stood up and made this deafening noise. I swear to God. You two, stop it, their teacher yelled. Marinette and Chloe turned around and looked at her. Whoops, she said under her breath. I have let every little argument slide, every shriek I hear from you. Their teacher began to lecture them very intensely. But even though it was really freaking loud, Marinette's mind just began to drown out the sound. She was so freaking tired, physically and of Chloe's constant screaming. Speaking of which, Chloe threw back a snarl, only to be shot down with threats of her dad being out of office. Right, this teacher's family had power over even Chloe's family? Oh, how the turntables have turned! Am I clear? She said firmly. Marinette nodded and drawled, Yes, ma'am. The teacher walked back to the center front and began to, teach, clearly not wanting any funny business. Well, not any more of it, at least. At least people like me, Chloe whispered, and Marinette, who was facing the window away from the blonde drama queen, rolled her eyes. It would be impossible to make that statement even more fake. You'd have to be Lila. Chloe growled. The black-haired girl drew out a dress in her sketchbook. At least designing gave her a grip on life and, emotions. Oh, look at me. I'm Marinette, and I act all high and mighty, but in reality, I'm nothing important, Chloe mocked. Marinette bit back a retort that would probably end in detention for like many weeks. It had been over 10 minutes, and Chloe hadn't given up her mean comments. Marinette took a deep breath, trying to not turn around and scream into oblivion. Thank God I live in a real house and not a cheap one above a store, Chloe hissed. That's it. That was the breaking point. Marinette was done. She was done. Marinette turned to face Chloe, giving the fiercest glare ever. The girl in front of her had a smug smirk. I'm done, Marinette said lowly and picked up her bag and stood. And walked out of the class to God knows where. She heard uneven footsteps behind her, but paid no attention to that. I'm going to end her, Nino, and don't get in my way. It had been a couple minutes, and Alia was incoherently screaming, Nino was trying to stop a murder, and Marinette was just sitting quietly, as angry as can be. As much as she appreciated Alia's protectiveness, her ears were about to bleed from the yelling. Today was not a good day. Everything was piling up. Chloe had no right to call her well, that's probably not best repeated. She had no right to continue to hiss cruel things at her. Marinette had baited her and all, but seriously, if you can't take it, don't dish it. Marinette felt a warm hand on her shoulder and she jolted around to look at the hand's owner. Her face was contorted into a scowl and burning narrowed eyes. However, when she saw Adrien, she let go of the fury a bit. The black-haired girl knew that she'd be fine in his presence. For some reason, him being there, a hand on her shoulder, made her feel comforted. It was the same feeling she had with Chat Noir last night. Weird that those two made her feel so at peace. Or that she felt at peace around Adrien, at all. Maybe the Marinette 2 years ago would have been screaming her head off and bolting away into the hills and valleys. Marinette, he asked gently, no doubt testing the waters to see if he would perish or not. She was very clearly mad. The blonde model held out his water bottle for her. Marinette looked at it and back at him, and he held it even closer out to her. She felt her expression ease up after taking a drink. Wow, smart kid. Who knew water could help? Adrien sat down beside her, and them in a comfortable silence, with the screaming Alia in the background. Chloe doesn't need to shed that much knowledge of her vocabulary skills, Adrien said carefully. Marinette scoffed. I'd like to share more. Adrien nodded, understanding that her hostile behavior was not normal. The raven-haired girl sighed. Did you know that far off over there, farther than you can probably see, there is a building? She started. No, he said, sounding pretty confused. It's abandoned. No one really goes there anymore, Marinette continued. She locked her eyes on where the said building would be. Even though it was far away from her own home or friends, it became a place of comfort when she came back to Paris. Oh, Adrien commented. It's quiet. I like it. No one bothers me there, Marinette said wistfully. She thought of the day she found the building. She had missed America terribly, her friends and her boyfriend. Flying around as Ladybug, she saw an old abandoned but still structurally sound building. No one was around, and she climbed up the outdoor cement stairs to reach the top. And she had sat there for 2 hours, sketching, thinking, and just living. Up there on that building, she wasn't Marinette Dupan Chang. fashion designer, baker's daughter, rival of Chloe, who had just gotten back from America. She wasn't Ladybug, superhero and savior of Paris. No, she just existed. And in her hectic life, that was nice. Quiet. Quiet is good, he mused. Marinette's head bobbed up and down. Can I ask you something? Adrienne said. Marinette turned to look at him. Yes, she said in a soft voice. Adrienne paused before regaining his ability to speak. Are you feeling okay? Not from Chloe, just in general. You don't normally react like that. Are you okay? Is something wrong? Adrienne asked. Marinette was silent. Was she feeling okay? No, she wasn't. Not after Matchmaker and questioning her relationship. Not after the kiss and the fear of feelings for her partner. Not after finding out there was a chance that Hawkmoth had merged two Miraculouses together. It was about to be too powerful to defeat. Not after Chloe had spoken insults at her. She wasn't really okay, so to speak. It's been, Marinette started, not sure how to explain. Interesting. Whatever is bothering you, I'll listen, he said, and Marinette nodded back, appreciating his kindness. I know. Hey, y'all, principal said y'all get the day off and each got it settled. Parents ain't gonna know. A student from their class cried out. Marinette nodded. Thank God. She had a break today. You guys down for ice cream? Nino asked. Marinette agreed that was a good idea. Luckily, everyone had their bags, so they headed off to find Andre and his magic ice cream cart. Or at the very least, a creamery. And to their luck, Andre was in a park near the school, so the 4 teenagers each got a cone. I'm so mad, but the ice cream is really helping, Ollie mused, licking her ice cream. Same, Marinette agreed. Well, whatever it takes to keep the school intact and Akuma's away from you guys, Nino shrugged. Marinette jolted. Hawkmoth and his Akumas had completely slipped her mind. It was a miracle that neither her or Alia hadn't caught in one. Marinette didn't even want to think about what would happen if she got akumatized. That would be a disaster in so many ways. Who knew we'd get a free day because of Chloe? Alia laughed, biting into her ice cream cone. Yeah, that was so unexpected, Adrienne laughed. He looked over at Marinette, who was gazing off into the distance, one hand on the ground bracing herself, and one holding her cone, though she wasn't eating. Hey, are you doing okay? He asked, snapping her out of her gaze. She shook her head, and a smile appeared on her face. Yeah, she said brightly, even if she wasn't completely okay. She was doing better now than before. The 4 friends began to chatter about school and the lessons they were completely blowing off. I still can't believe we're skipping school, Nino smiled. Yeah, me too. Alia poked his cheek and was immediately swatted away. We're good kids. We don't do stuff like this, Marinette laughed. Adrienne raised a brow at her. You're the one who literally walked out of class. That's not a defining action of a good kid, now is it? He said with a toothy smile. Marinette pursed her lips to the side. Touché, she said. But then again, whoever said I wanted to be a perfect little child? Marinette countered, throwing a playful smirk at Adrienne and raising 2 fingers to her cheek. Adrienne shook his head, laughing. Well, then this is a good start if you want to break down that reputation. Alia nudged Marinette's side to get her attention. Your phone's ringing with text from Aiden, she said in a sing-song voice and a smile on her face. Marinette bit her lip. I'm with friends. I don't need to text them 24/7, she said, and Alia nodded and turned the face the phone face down. Well, since we're all finished with our ice cream, Nino and I are going on a picnic date. You guys think you have an idea of what you're gonna do? The curly-haired girl said, grabbing her boyfriend's hand. Marinette waved it off. Yeah, we're good, she replied for the both of them. Adrien cocked his head at her. His eyebrows were crinkled together and lips pulled to his side. What are we doing? He asked, and Marinette flashed him a sly smile. I'll show you. She stood up and offered a hand out to him. Adrien gaped at her hand and was frozen in place, making the smile on her face grow. Hey, do you trust me? Marinette copied the famous line from Disney's Aladdin. Adrien brought out a huge grin, and his cheeks were a little pink, and took her hand. As long as you promise to show me a whole new world, he joked back. Marinette laughed and began walking, having him follow. I will, she winked. We've been walking for a while. Where are we going? Adrien complained. Marinette laughed. She still hadn't told him. Don't be such a baby, you'll see. And it's been like 10 minutes, she said, standing on her toes to try and pat the top of his head. Good Lord, was this boy tall. It's been so long. We've been walking for so long, he whined. Marinette giggled. Well, lucky for you. We're here. Adrien looked around with his eyebrows knitted together. Where are we? Marinette looked at him with a bright expression. The building I told you about. We picked the perfect time to skip class, she smiled and pulled on his arm to go up the stairs. Reaching the roof, Marinette held her breath and looked up at Adrien. His mouth was open in an O shape, and his eyes were widened. Wow, he breathed. Marinette laughed. Yeah, I've been doing some upgrades to my favorite place. It was still an old rooftop on an abandoned building, but it looked cozy and nice, in a way. There was a large piece of fabric that was spread across it, that was weighed down by large rocks in the corners. There were 2 chairs with cushions on them, and a couch in the middle, and a coffee table. Lights were wrapped around the large piles of wood and expanded across the small area, like floating lights instead of a ceiling. Candles were spread around the tables, some real with covers and others fake with glow-up wicks. There was a small stack of pillows and a larger one of blankets. You like my home away from home? She asked, biting her lip. Adrien looked back at her with a huge smile. It's amazing, he exclaimed. Marinette giggled and took a seat on one of the chairs, motioning for Adrien to follow her lead. It's much prettier at night, but during the day you can see more, she said, looking out at the distance. Adrien's eyes followed where hers was going, and she noticed his lips parted in a breathtaking sigh. Wow, Paris is so big and busy, he said breathlessly. Marinette nodded. Yeah, it's strange to see our city like this, from a distance. We're so used to being in it, truly being in it, around the buildings in use and the people bustling. It's strangely beautiful from this point of view. We can see almost everything from here, all at once. Everything is existing at the same time, Marinette smiled. Adrien was silent still. His eyes were still raking over the city they called home. It's beautiful. No wonder this is your favorite place. Marinette nodded. She reached over to her left and grabbed a small plank of wood. It had been sanded down so it didn't have any splinters to give, but it was still small, and it came from one of the piles on the roof. How'd you get all this stuff up here? Adrien asked. Marinette's lips curled into a smile, and she brought up one finger to them. Shh, that's a secret I'll never tell, she said gently, making Adrien laugh. This place, how can it be more beautiful? He asked. Marinette smiled. Well, she started, thinking of the many nights she'd spent here after she was, supposed to be asleep. Once her parents were out, she'd escape to this rooftop and spend the nights looking at the stars and talking to Tiki. She usually had a note written for her parents in the morning saying that she was at the store or at a friend's house or something so they wouldn't think that she got kidnapped. At night, I turn on the lights, and they look like glowing fairies up there. She pointed to the hanging lights. And the candles, they make it warm. It gives off a sense of comfort, like being engulfed in a hug. I see the busy Parisian night with people running home or going on a late night walk. It feels like a living dream, or that I'm watching a movie, or living a movie. And at night, on Saturday at 2:20 a.m. sharp, the lights out for Akuma's victim thing starts. So everything's dark. And when you look up, you see the stars for 10 minutes. That makes you feel alive. Because it's so unreal. But it's also real. You wouldn't think the stars in the sky, you wouldn't think you'd see the stars in the sky in a city. But you do. And they twinkle. I'd spend 10 minutes staring up into the galaxy that we live in the quiet, in the peace. It's beautiful, Adrienette breathed. She and Adrian were both quietly looking out into the city. Ataraxia, Adrian said after a minute of silence. Marinette looked over at him, her eyebrows knitted together. What's that? She asked. Adrian smiled. It means a state of bliss and serene calmness. I think that's why you love this place. You love feeling ataraxia, Adrian explained. Marinette slowly nodded her head. She was biting her lip and smiled a sideways smile. She looked up at Adrian and her smile widened. I like that. Ataraxia. This is my ataraxia space, she hummed. Adrian smiled slightly and seemed to train his eyes onto school, probably thinking about classes. I've never shown or told anyone else about this place, Marinette said, cutting through the quietness. Adrian gasped dramatically and placed his hands on his heart. You trust me so much, he cried out. Marinette burst out laughing. I guess I do, she said. Adrian bounced while sitting down. Well, if one thing's for sure, you sure delivered on your promise. This is a whole new world, he mused. Marinette smiled. Awesome! I'm glad you like this place as much as I do. She thought for a moment before speaking again. Do you want to meet here next Friday? So you can see it at night and see the stars. The black-haired girl offered. The blonde boy nodded his head quickly and said, yeah, that'd be great. Marinette nodded. I like this feeling of ataraxia.